Okay, let's go ahead and get started with our midterm review. I have posted the review and the key on Canvas, and then this is the video explaining the key. We're going to start with Chapter 2, and we need to look at the overhead applied in the customizing department. And I'm going to write the formula here down. The overhead is going to be the fixed overhead plus the variable overhead times the base, which here is direct labor hours. The fixed overhead we're given is $68,880. Plus the variable overhead. The variable overhead is $3 for customizing per direct labor hour. So take that $3 and multiply it by how many direct labor hours that we have. And that is 8,200. And the overhead is 93,480. Now that we know that, we can find our predetermined overhead rate. The first thing that you need to do is get the total overhead, the total manufacturing overhead, and then use that to calculate your predetermined overhead rate. Our predetermined overhead rate is the estimated total manufacturing overhead over the estimated allocation base, which is direct labor hours. The estimated manufacturing overhead is what we just calculated, 93,480, and then the base is direct labor hours of the 8,200. Which gives us a predetermined overhead rate of $11.40 per direct labor hour. Now we need to look at the applied overhead. We need to calculate the overhead that's applied. Now that we know it's $11.40 per direct labor hour, we're going to multiply that by how many hours were used for this job. For this job, 90 hours were used. Take the $11.40, multiply by the 90 hours, and we get $1,026 of overhead applied for this job. Okay. Number two. Number 2 is also still from Chapter 2. And for this one, we're looking to calculate the amount of overhead applied as well. This one works a little bit differently. It's the same formula. They use a plant-wide rate, and the job is the fixed overhead is 99,200. So the formula that we were using to calculate the total overhead is the fixed overhead plus the variable overhead The variable overhead is $3.40 times the allocation base of how many direct labor hours. And there is 62,000 direct labor hours. And the fixed overhead was 99,200 plus 3.4 times 60,000 is 210,800. Our total overhead then is 310,000. Now we can use that to calculate the predetermined overhead rate. The predetermined overhead rate is the estimated total overhead over the estimated total base. We just calculated the estimated total overhead of 310 and divide that by the base, which we know is direct labor hours, and that's the 62,000 direct labor hours. Our predetermined overhead rate is $5 per direct labor hour. Then to apply the overhead, we're going to multiply it by how many of our allocation base we had. It said that it requires 270 direct labor hours. Overhead applied is $5 times 270 direct labor hours, and that's $1,350 of applied overhead to this job. Okay, the next one is also from Chapter 2, so you have 3 questions from Chapter 2. Oh, this is number 3. This one, it says to compute the predetermined overhead rate. Well, we just had practice of 2 of them, so I know we can do this. The predetermined is the estimated total manufacturing overhead over the estimated total base. And in this problem, it says we're going to have to calculate first. In order to get the manufacturing overhead, we're going to have to add a couple of things together. We know that the fixed overhead, here's the fixed manufacturing overhead right there, and variable is $7.10 per direct labor hours for 75,000 right here, 75,000. This is for the actual. We're looking for the estimated. So that is the 75 right there. Okay, so to get the total overhead, again, fixed overhead plus variable overhead times the base. 1,372,500 plus the $7.10 times the 75,000. 75,000 is the estimated. And we get 1,905,000. That is going to be our estimated total manufacturing overhead for our predetermined overhead rate. And then the allocation base is the estimated of the 75,000 $25.40 per direct labor hour. Number 4 starts chapter 3. And this is a journal entry. Okay, so the company transferred $70,000 from work in process to finished goods. And then they also recorded cost of goods sold of $76,000. We need to prepare the journal entries for those two. So let's first look at the transferring $70,000 from work in process to finished goods. We will debit finished goods because we're transferring it to finished goods. Debit finished goods $70,000, and we're transferring it from work in process. So we will credit work in process. And then the second one is to record cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold is once the items are sold. So before they're sold, they're sitting in finished goods. We need to take them out of finished goods and recognize the cost. We're going to debit cost of goods sold, $76,000, and credit finished goods. Okay, number 5. Number 5 is also from chapter 3. And we are looking for the adjusted cost of goods sold. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to figure out what the cost of goods sold is. So here we have manufacturing overhead applied was $59,200. And the actual manufacturing overhead is $55,900. We know what we applied and we know what was actual. So let's just look at the T account. You can do this a couple of different ways. So let's look at the T account. Actual is going to be on the debit side. That is $55,900. And on the credit side is going to be the applied, $59,200, which leaves us a credit balance of $3,300. We over applied. We over applied our manufacturing overhead by $3,300. So to calculate our adjusted cost of goods sold, we are going to, adjusted cost of goods sold. We're going to take the beginning finished goods inventory, add in cost of goods manufactured, subtract ending finished goods, and then here we have over applied, so we will subtract the manufacturing overhead over application. Beginning finished goods inventory was $55,000. Plus cost of goods manufactured minus ending inventory and then minus our over application. $234,900 is our adjusted cost of goods sold. Okay, number 6. We want to calculate the manufacturing overhead cost, the corporation's manufacturing overhead cost. So let's first, before we can figure out what their overhead cost is, we have to calculate of course, our predetermined overhead rate. And again, that is the estimated total manufacturing overhead minus the estimated base. Manufacturing overhead is 363. Over the base, which is direct labor hours. So that's 60,500. The predetermined overhead rate is $6 per direct labor hour. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the actual overhead of 402,000 and then take the applied, which is going to be that $6 times the base of 57,250. Subtract the actual from the applied, and that's 58,500. So the corporation's manufacturing actual is 402,000. Applied was 343. And then what you're really looking for is whether it was over or under. And the actual was more than the applied. So in this problem, we under applied our overhead. Okay, let's go on to number 7. Okay, number 7 starts chapter 4. And in this one, we are asked to find the equivalent units for conversion costs for the assembly department. Okay, we're going to have to first calculate the units transferred. So let me get that started here. Okay, units transferred. Units transferred is beginning inventory plus what was started minus ending work in process or ending inventory. Okay, let's look here. Beginning inventory is 2,400 units. They started the month off with 2,400 units. And in addition, there were 62,000 transferred in from the previous department. So that was what was started that month. And then the ending work in process, ending inventory was $20,000. Okay, the 24 plus the 62 minus the 20. The units transferred is 44,400. Now that we know the units that were transferred, we can calculate the equivalent units, because the equivalent units here are the units transferred plus the ending work in process percentage, the percent complete. The units transfer is 44,400. And work in process, we had 20,000 in work in process at the end of the month. And those 20,000 were 60% complete with respect to the conversion costs. So take the 20,000 and multiply it by 60%. And that tells you what percent complete they were, or the equivalent units of those. And we get 44,400 and 12,000. The equivalent units for the ending work in process inventory is 12,000. 20,000 partially completed units at 60% equals 12,000 completed units. So then the total equivalent units will be that plus what was transferred. And that is 56,400. Okay, number 8. Number 8, we're going to start with the same thing, the units transferred. And it's the same thing. It's beginning work in process plus what was started minus the ending work in process. The beginning work in process started the month with 21,800. Plus what was started that month, and it says an additional 103,000. And then we subtract the ending work in process, and the ending work in process was 36,000 units. That is 88,800. Then we need to calculate the equivalent units. Okay, the equivalent, let me try this again. I'm not really sure why it's doing that. The equivalent units are going to be the units transferred plus the ending inventory percentage. The units transferred were 88,800, and in ending inventory we had 36,000. And those 36,000 were 70% complete. So we multiply that by 70%. The equivalent units were 114,000 units. Okay, now The question is asking the cost per equivalent unit. So we calculated the cost. We calculated how many equivalent units there were. Now we have to go through and calculate the cost. Okay, so we're going to take beginning inventory plus the costs added. Beginning inventory was 25,700. And then add the, oops, I'm sorry, that goes up there. Erase. Okay, so that was 25, it was beginning inventory. And then the costs added is 8,558. So we have a total cost of 881,580. To calculate the cost, you're going to take that and you'll divide by the equivalent units that we calculated, 114,000. So the cost per equivalent unit is 7.733. Cost per equivalent unit. Okay, then let's go to 9. 9, we are looking for the cost assigned to the units transferred out. And it's the same formula that we've been using. The units transferred is beginning inventory, and that's 5,500, plus what was started, the 60,800, minus the ending inventory. That's 57,300. Take that, and we're going to multiply it by the equivalent unit cost. Take what the units transferred were, and then multiply it by 608, 348, 384. Okay, number 10 is going to start chapter 5. And this question is the total contribution margin if sales volume increased by 40%. Okay, so let's first look at the contribution margin ratio. The contribution margin ratio is the contribution margin divided by sales. The contribution margin is 175.5 divided by sales of 390, and that's 0.45. Now we're going to take that and calculate what the sales volume would be if it increased by 40%. So we're going to take the contribution margin of 0.45, 45%, and we're going to multiply it by 1.4 times the sales of 390. If we're looking at increasing sales by 40%, we can multiply the 390 by 40 and then add that back to the 390 to get what the increase would be. Or we can multiply it by 1.4 and get to the answer directly. So that's 0.45 times 546. If we increased our sales by 40%, our sales would be 546,000. And then multiply that by the contribution margin. So the new total contribution margin at a sales volume increase of 40% would be 245,700. Okay, 11. 11 is asking for the break-even in dollar sales. And the break-even in dollar sales formula is fixed cost divided by contribution margin ratio. So before we can calculate the break-even portion, we need to find out what the contribution margin is. So we're going to do the same as we did with number 10. We need to calculate the unit contribution margin. The contribution margin is selling price minus variable expense. So take the 340 minus the 7480, and that is 265.20. That is the contribution margin. Take the contribution margin and divide it by sales of 340, and we get a contribution margin of 0.87. Now fixed cost is 176,280 divided by the 0.75, and we get 226,000 is our break-even point in sales dollars. Okay, number 12. Number 12 is asking the break-even in monthly dollar sales as well. And here we have a unit contribution margin of 205. And the variable cost is, the selling price is 205. The variable cost is 67. Same thing, you need to subtract the two. So take those and subtract them, and you get 137.35. Divide that by 205, which is the selling price, and you get 0.67. That is your contribution margin ratio. Then take your fixed cost of 391,347 and divide it by the 0.67, and the break even in monthly sales dollars is 5,084,100. Okay, 13. 13 is asking for the unit sales that they need to attain a company's monthly target profit of $24,000. Okay, we need to figure out the contribution margin, which is selling price minus variable cost, and that is 91. Now, to the unit sales at target profit, it's similar to the break-even point. You're going to take the target profit plus fixed costs over the unit contribution margin. So the break-even point is fixed cost over contribution margin. But if you're looking for a certain target profit, it's target profit plus fixed cost divided by the contribution margin. And they're looking for a target profit of $24,000. And we add to it the fixed cost of $437,240, and we divide it by 91, the contribution margin. That's $461,240 and 5,069 units. Okay, 14. 14 starts chapter 6. And here we're looking for the total period cost using variable costing. So we're going to have to remember what goes under variable costing and what goes under absorption costing. For variable costing, we're looking at variable selling and admin, which is 4 times 12,000 units that they sell. And then the fixed manufacturing overhead, which is 406. And then the fixed selling in admin. We're looking for the period cost. So this is not the product cost, but the period cost, what is not associated with the product. Now the next one we're going to do is actually the absorption costing. Actually, no, it's the product cost. I'm sorry, then the absorption costing. Okay, so let's go to 15. Okay, 15 is the variable cost for the product cost. So the product cost is going to be direct materials, direct labor, and variable overhead. Direct labor is 44. Direct materials is 44. Direct labor is 46. And variable overhead is 9. Okay. Oops. 16. 16 is absorption costing the product cost. Okay, for absorption costing, we still have direct materials and direct labor and the variable overhead, just like with variable costing. But absorption costing absorbs more of the cost. So we're also going to do fixed overhead. Direct materials is 88, direct labor is 79, variable overhead is 7, and the fixed overhead is 210,600 divided by how many units? They produce 5,400 units. That's 39. $213 is the absorption costing unit product cost. Okay, 17. 17, we're looking for the total gross margin. And we need to calculate a couple of things. First, we have, sales. They sell for $143. They sell for, $143. And they sold 2,700. So let's take how many they sold and multiply it by the cost, and we get our sales of $396.10. Then we have to figure out our fixed overhead just like we did before. How many were produced is 2,820. Take the fixed manufacturing overhead and divide it by how many were produced, and we get a per unit for fixed overhead. Now we need to figure out our unit cost. Direct materials, direct labor, variable overhead, and fixed overhead. Because remember, this is absorption. They absorb more of the cost. Direct materials is 47, direct labor is 23, variable overhead is 14, fixed overhead is 34. So we have an absorption product cost of $118,000. And I just want to calculate something super quick. Okay. Now to figure out our gross margin, we have our sales of $396, and from that we need to subtract our cost of goods sold, and that will give us our gross margin. To calculate cost of goods sold, we're going to take this $118 product cost and multiply it by the units sold. 118 times 2,770 gives us 326,860. And this is 2,770 times the 118. Subtract the 2, and our gross margin is $69,000. 250. Okay, almost done. Number 18. There's 21 here. Number 18. We want to know how much cost in total would be allocated to the first stage allocation. Okay, so we have three. We have wages, depreciation, and utilities. So we're going to take our wages, our depreciation, and our utilities. Wages is $278,000. Depreciation was $270,000, and our utilities is $232,000. Okay, so take the wages of $278 and multiply it by the percentage, which is 35, because we're looking at assembly. That's $97,300. Depreciation is $270 times 30%, right there. And that's $81,000. And then the last one is utilities, $232 times 10%. $23,200. Okay, 19 is similar to this one. I didn't tell you when we start chapter 7. That one starts chapter 7. Okay. Now, this is number 19 right here. And we want the activity rate for the order processing activity cost pool. And we're going to do the same thing. We have wages, depreciation, and occupancy, and we're going to multiply by the percentage for the order processing, which is 40%, 45%, and 35%. The 155,000 times 45%, so times 0.45, 69. And then occupancy is by 35%, 61. So a total of 287,000. And 20 is also similar. Okay, for this one, we're going to do the batches. We've got, we need the overhead costs that would be assigned using activity-based costing, which is chapter 7. Okay, so we have our batches, our customer orders, and our assembly hours. Batches are $59.11 per batch, $72.69 per customer order, and $3.80 per assembly hour. And then we're going to multiply it by how many there are. And this is for product K91B. There are 80 batches, so multiply by 80. And orders, there's 30. And assembly hours, $484 for a grand total of $8,748.70. And on to our last one, which is also Chapter 7. This is number 21. What is the overhead cost? Okay. So the overhead cost, we're going to look at first, we're going to add these two together. This is 1095. Okay, so remember that. That's the two because under processing, they're both 30%. We're calculating this under processing and supervising here. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to have to bring this up because I need the space. Here we have the processing. Oh, I knew that was going to happen. Okay. Try it down here. It's going to be that total with both of them because it's the same percentage. Or you can multiply each one separately by 30 and you're going to end up with the same answer. So I'm just cutting out a step. Times 30%. That's $32,850. And then divide that by the machine hours of 16,260. And we get a predetermined overhead rate of $2.02 per machine hour. And then supervising. This time the percentages are different, so we have to calculate them differently. Separately, I mean, not differently. 102,000 times 50%. And then 7,500 times 40%. Okay, that's 54,000. And divide it by how many batches they have, which is 1,250. And we get a predetermined overhead rate of $43.20 per batch. Now that we have that calculated, we will go back to the processing and take that $2.02 predetermined overhead rate, multiply it by 1,260. That's 2,545.20. And then for supervising, take the 43.20 and multiply it by the 640. 27,648 to get a total of 30,193. And you use these numbers right there. Okay, that is it for the midterm review. You have 21 questions here, which means you have 21 questions on your midterm. They're all multiple choice, and I did the review at the same time that I did the test. So this is an excellent review. Okay, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give me a call. Thank you.